Two Raptors reporters put out information regarding the Toronto Raptors ahead of this year's trade deadline. It seems like we've got a bit of conflicting information regarding Gary Trent Jr.'s future with the organization. So we'll discuss those in this video, as well as Thaddeus Young potentially messed up big time as he revealed some details of a private meeting the Toronto Raptors had. And there's a video of Nick Nurse reacting to this leak, and he did not seem too happy. So we'll discuss that and a whole bunch more in this video. Without further ado, let's jump to the first topic of discussion. First thing we're taking a look at is Gary Trent Jr., quote, happy to re-sign this summer. Now, this is the first article that we're going to be breaking down regarding Gary Trent Jr., and it's coming from Michael Grange. And this might be a positive for a lot of Toronto Raptors fans that are hopeful Gary Trent Jr. will not be traded and will not be sent away this free agency. We end up losing him for nothing. And with all of the reports that have come out regarding Gary Trent Jr. potentially getting traded, it's nice to hear that there is a possibility he'll end up staying. It's coming from Michael Grange. I'll take a couple excerpts from this article out, but basically he said that the Raptors have signaled that they are willing to re-sign Gary Trent Jr., and sources with knowledge of the situation say he would be happy to re-sign this summer. Quote, of course, they said, but at what cost? That is the rub. So, that's pretty cut and dry there from Michael Grange, at least from his sources. He's basically saying that Gary Trent Jr. will be happy to come back to the Toronto Raptors. He doesn't seem that disgruntled, and the Raptors are willing to bring him back home. But the cost is the big question mark. And the article basically goes on to say, I won't read it all verbatim, but three-point shooting is a big premium in the league. You look at guys like Tyler Hero, Jordan Poole, Anthony Simons, all getting north of $100 million contracts, in the recent years. So that's the reference point for Gary Trent Jr.'s sort of future contract extension, and which is one reason he basically goes on to say that, Gary Trent Jr. is thought to be available ahead of this year's trade deadline, as the Raptors aren't ready to sign him to a contract well north of $100 million. The thinking goes that the Raptors need to trade him so they don't lose one of their starters and best three-point shooters for basically no return. So Grange comes out with an interesting point, basically saying that the reverse could also be true, saying that, the chances of the Raptors finding a player as good as Trent Jr. in free agency, an elite shooter that's 24 years old, is quite slim. And in that context, it's in some ways more likely the Raptors sign Gary Trent Jr. than trade him before this year's trade deadline or current road trip that they're currently going on. So that's an interesting perspective from Michael Grange. Obviously saying the Raptors need three-point shooting. He has that skills. He's a young guy, so it's potentially more likely that they do re-sign him than trade him away. And personally, I hope that we definitely re-sign him if we're not going to trade him away. The worst possible outcome is if the Toronto Raptors don't trade him and then he walks in free agency for nothing. But the Raptors have to be willing to give out one of these big contracts, one of these big deals for Gary Trent Jr. if we don't trade him ahead of this year's trade deadline. So that's one point that I sort of want to bring up regarding this whole Gary Trent Jr. situation. But you look at the contracts that are comparable, and you can see why the Raptors might get cold feet, especially considering the money they have locked up in Siakam, the money they're going to have to keep open for Scotty Barnes. Fred VanVleet could be getting a big deal, and, Precious Achiuwa, OG Anunoby, these are all guys that are going to be getting some pay raises in future seasons. So, if they're not willing to lock into Gary Trent Jr., I think a trade could definitely happen. And while it's nice to hear that Gary Trent Jr. is happy, because there was speculation that he was a little bit disgruntled given the CJ McCollum report that came out about a week ago that, now it's the speculations on OG Anunoby being the disgruntled guy. We made a couple videos on that yesterday, but, it's nice to see that Gary Trent Jr. is willing to re-sign. He just wants to get his bag. And honestly, if he can get more money elsewhere, you can't blame him for potentially leaving. So, but it's nice that he's not mad with the franchise, mad with the organization, especially where he was benched for a stretch of this year. But there was another report that came out yesterday that we'll discuss. But before that, if you guys are interested in betting on the Toronto Raptors, especially ahead of this year's trade deadline, definitely check out the CoolBet app, CoolBet Sportsbook. They're regulated in Ontario. They're available all across Canada. If you use the link down in the description to sign up, get some boosted odds using, for these Toronto Raptors games. They have bets. They have odds for pretty well every single Toronto Raptors star on our team potentially getting traded, with the exception of Scotty Barnes, because there's no way that man gets dealt. So you can see those odds there. And if you want interested on betting on the game, right? If you're interested in seeing how this team performs tonight, let's see if we get the right stats up. Do we? It's not popping up here. There we go. right? If you're interested in betting on the Raptors game against the Kings tonight, you can pretty well bet on anything. Player points, player assists, rebounds, the games, the plus minus, all those sort of stuff. So definitely check out the CoolBet app using our link down below. But let's dive into the second article. Next thing we're taking a look at is the Raptors want to keep 4 players together. And this is coming from Josh Lewenberg. And it almost contradicts a little bit what Michael Grange said, but obviously, there's multiple sources out there and some might be leaks. Some people have speculated that the Michael Grange stuff is Masai Ujiri just uses Michael Grange to put out fake news. The Jalen Suggs stuff from draft night is one thing everyone points to, but Josh Lewenberg had a little bit of different information coming about on his article that came out recently, and basically saying in the past day or so, changes seem to be inevitable. It's hard to imagine Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster opting to stand pat at the deadline, given how the first 48 games of the season have gone. They've got a bunch of holes to fill, and this much is clear. The next 7 contests won't change that. So, and there he's referring to the road trip the Toronto Raptors are about to go on. But to what degree will the roster change over in the next few weeks, though? According to a league source familiar with the situation in Toronto, the sense is that Ujiri is looking for any reason he can to keep the core of Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Scotty Barnes together, and not the other way around. You can understand why he might be reluctant to break it up. That is the group that is homegrown. He built it. His organization has spent the time and resources to develop it, and he believes in it. And that's at least that he has for a while. So that is interesting. And specifically when you're talking about the core, Gary Trent Jr. was not listed. He was not listed as one of those 4 guys the Raptors want to keep together. And we've heard rumblings like this over the past few days that Masai Ujiri is reluctant to break away, our core players, right? The players he considers the core. And all the post-game press conferences we've heard over the last few years, this is a sentiment that's been commonly stated by Masai Ujiri. He's never really added Gary Trent Jr.'s name to the core pieces of the Toronto Raptors roster. So the fact that he was ignored in this one, this information being put out, I don't know, right? Grange is saying it's possible to re-sign him if we're willing to give him that contract. And then we hear that Masai Ujiri's definitely going to be making moves, very much likely. But, he wants to keep the core players together. And really the only assets we have that can net us a very game-changing return, at least in terms of where the Raptors are headed this season, right, would be those 4 guys named, as well as Gary Trent Jr., maybe Precious Achiuwa, but I feel like right now wouldn't be a smart time to trade Precious Achiuwa because he's been injured most of the season, and he still has a lot of potential that really wouldn't be able to get that much value back for right now. Little bang for your buck for Precious Achiuwa on the trade market at this point, so I don't know. It's, we've heard Mark Stein come out saying that Gary Trent Jr. could be moved, Kevin O'Connor, a bunch of reporters, Jake Fisher, all these guys have speculated on all the rumors regarding Gary Trent Jr., so we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know if you guys, are swayed by these 2 reports that have come out in the days, but really this road trip should solidify Masai Ujiri's decision-making, and we'll see if moves end up happening and start going down. But the next thing we're taking a look at is Thaddeus Young messing up. Now, Thaddeus Young was brought in to be our veteran presence. He's been given steady minutes. I'm a big fan of Thaddeus Young's game. He also seems like a cool guy to have in the locker room. But recently, there's been some weird stuff going on. Obviously, he had that confrontation with Scotty Barnes at halftime of a game a few weeks back. But that all got mended over. That drama was put out pretty well immediately. But today, Thaddeus Young, I'll just show the video. He basically leaked some stuff. Basically said that the Toronto Raptors in their film session were watching old footage of the team from last season and looking at the differences between the 2 sides. And Nick Nurse did not seem happy that the details of their film session got out. So we'll take a look at this video.
Tell us about the film session you just had, looking back at last year's defense. How revealing was that for you, and how revealing was it for your players?
We didn't have a film session. What are you talking about? Looking back at last year's defense. That was a closed meeting.
It didn't happen.
So you can see in his facial expression, Nick Nurse was not happy that Thaddeus Young sort of put that information out. And, obviously it's nothing too big. It's not like he leaked the secret sauce, the secret recipe for the Toronto Raptors. But it is a little bit of a bad look. And Nick Nurse probably knows that people, on Sportsnet, TSN, Raptors Digest, YouTube, everywhere are going to be speculating now that Nick Nurse has resorted to looking at film from last season to show the differences, show the drop-off in defensive intensity and energy and all that sort of stuff from this season. So it's, I get why he's a little bit frustrated that this got put out, especially where it was a private team meeting and stuff. But he really, if you look at the facial expressions on Nick Nurse in that vid, he was not too pleased that that got put out from Thaddeus Young. So people are speculating now Thaddeus Young might be going to the Nick Nursery, right? I've heard a couple people just say that he might get traded. I don't know if I'm going that far with that, but from your vet, unfortunate stuff. Hopefully it doesn't lead to a Thaddeus Young benching. But the final thing that we're discussing in this vid is the road trip begins, right? The Toronto Raptors are now on that dreaded road trip that really could make or break their season. As Lewenberg sort of put out, it's unlikely Masai Ujiri will shift his tone. They probably already have their minds made up about the direction of this team, but the last chance, the last cause for the Raptors to potentially turn the season around happens on this road trip. And if they, while it's unlikeliest, they're going 7 games on the road out west, right? It's unlikely they'll be able to go on a miraculous win streak, but if they do, maybe they'll be able to turn things around. I mean, you look back to when we almost traded Kyle Lowry. We traded away Rudy Gay. We were likely going to trade Kyle Lowry, right? The Raptors went on a little winning streak, and we ended up turning that 2014 season around and started the modern era of Raptors basketball, where we actually have expectations for this team to win. But we'll see if the Raptors can replicate that magic now, because if we lose 5 in the next 7 games, 6 in the next 7 games, we're rebuilding. We're retooling. This season's a wash. So that's at least my opinion. But let me know what you guys think about all this Toronto Raptors stuff. Again, thanks for the 27,000 subscribers. Definitely check out the Coolbet app using the link down below. You guys are the best. I'm signing out. Cheers.